Hello and welcome to a new training video about before and after save flows. We're going to talk about what these flows are and how we can create them in Decisions, as well as just look at some examples of what you can do with them. So what are before and after save flows? Essentially, these are flows that you can build that will run or be triggered to run whenever different entities and decisions are being saved. There's really two main things that will trigger these before and after save flows. You can set them up to be run after saving a flow. So when you're building a flow in Decisions, as soon as you save it, then it can run these flows. Or you can have it save upon entering data or saving data into a data structure through the configuration folder. So you can set these up in the configuration folder to say anytime, say this case entity gets saved, I want it to run this flow, either right before or right after it gets saved. And so that's the great power that we have with these. So we're going to break this down in two separate pieces. We're going to take a look at each of these examples here. So the first one are going to be the flows, and we can access this through the designer extensions folder. You can access designer extensions through the system folder by going to designers, tool customization, and designer extensions. You can also access in a future update, eventually we'll add it on the project level, so you can actually open up a project and have the designer extensions for these before and after save flows to occur on just the project level. So they can be project specific instead of all system wide. But essentially what you do is in designer extensions, you go to the flow option up at the top and you'll see a list of events, and you can add additional events for flows to run after a save happens, right before a save happens, and even more things like when the flow loads or when you add steps to the flow as well. But our focus here is going to be about the before and after saving ones. So in the designer extensions, this is basically just based on the flows in the designer. So when you save a flow in the designer, it will run these particular actions that we build, either right before the save happens or right after the save happens. So we will be setting them across the entire system in our examples today, but down the line, we will be adding methods and ways for you to do the same thing just on the project level. That way you don't have to have it run across your entire system. So let's jump over to Decisions and take a look at this in action. So here I am in Decisions, just to show where I can access all of these items here. So again, if you're looking for on the system level, if I go to System, Expand Designers, Expand Toolbox Customization, you'll find Designer Extensions down here. And this is where I can add a number of other things like extensions to the other different designers. But most importantly, what we're talking about today, the before and after save flows. So you'd easily just go right here, click on whichever one you want to create, provide it a name, and it'll create a new flow for you. I've already created one here, so I'm just going to open that one up and show what I've got. From here, you can go ahead and build the flow out to then do whatever it is you want to do with this particular project. Lots of different things you can do with it if you want to, help audit your data in different ways, maybe send messages, different things like that. You can easily do that and set it up to occur right before the save event or right after. So for my demonstration, I'm just going to have a simple pop-up appear that just notifies the user that the data has been saved, just to appear in the center of my screen when I'm going to demonstrate this. So that's all I'm going to do for this, just to show that it works and how the data pops up for me. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to open up a flow from Lunch and Learn, and I'm just going to demonstrate what happens. So let's just say, I don't like this. I want to move this over a tiny bit. That's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I make my changes, whatever I need to change to my flow. As soon as I hit save, it's going to run that before and after save flow that I created. Now, what I created was a before save flow, so it'll technically run right before the save happens. And then we'll get my little notification at the top saying, hey, your flow has been saved, right? Now, with my use case, it's very simple. So the difference between when that popped up and when the save happened is very minuscule, but it does matter sometimes, whether it's before or after, depending on what you're trying to do. But that's simply how it works. It just anytime you make your save, it'll appear there, and I'll be able to see the notification or get the emails sent or have the data audited and sent somewhere, whatever that may be, whatever reason I'm building there, I can easily just set that up and have this work. Now, since this is system-wide, it'll work across all projects in all flows. Anytime I save any flow anywhere, that pop-up will appear for me. So just take that to note. If you want something to be project level, we will have an update for it. But in the meantime, you'll have to use some kind of rules or something first to assess whether or not you even want it to run the rest of your process. And if it doesn't meet that criteria because it's in the wrong project, then it just ends the flow and nothing happens, no pop-up, nothing changes. It allows it to continue. But if it does meet certain criteria, then you can have the rest of your process continue. So you just need to kind of consider that and build that, before in the beginning of your flow here, if you do want some more kind of restrictions on it and not just be across the whole system. Now, the second place that we can make changes and be able to make events happen before or after a save is on a configuration folder for a data structure of some kind. So anytime the data actually gets saved in this data structure, so if I'm creating a new case entity and my flows are creating it and saving that data into the database, then it can run the before or after save flows that correspond to it. So anytime it gets saved, there's also delete ones as well. So I could have that data run right before it deletes or right after it deletes as well. Another one thing that's very important to do with this, because it's a little bit different than the flows. The flows are typically more like manual, right? You click the save button, it saves the flow, and then it's done. You're not having it auto save flows for you. In this case, since it's creating data, you want to be careful not to have data being saved in any kind of cycle. So, you don't want your after save flow to then save a new item in the database, because then you have your first save and then it'll run your after save flow, which makes a save. And because it's making a save, you're going to have to run the after save flow again, which makes a save, and so on and so forth. It creates this awful cycle. So you want to be very careful about creating these things because they could sometimes create some cycles. You want to be very careful not to avoid those, loops and things that could definitely cause a lot of issues on your system or in your databases. So just be a little aware of that when you're building with these. But aside from that, it's just simply adding these, and anytime your data gets saved, you can easily track that information. Maybe you want to track who's making the save in a different way, or you want to, notify users of what data has been saved or when new updates have been made to a case entity or to a database or something like that. You can easily have that run and send messages and track things accordingly. Okay, so here we are in decisions. I'm in a configuration folder for a case entity that I've created here at some point in time. So I'm going to use this case entity configuration folder to add a new event for any time I try to save something in my case entity here. So I'm going to go up to entity event flows, and this is where I can create my after delete or before deletes or after before save flows here as well. So I'm going to just create an after save one since I created a before save one in the other example here. And I'm going to hit create on this. And then I can go ahead and make this flow do whatever I want to do with it, right? Check my data, track it some way, maybe send some more data somewhere else, send an email or a notification to someone, whatever I want to do. You'll also see up at the top that same note that I mentioned about being careful not to have any weird save cycles or loops that you want to get stuck in. We notify that up here too. So there still is a reminder for yourself, please make sure you don't save any steps or use any steps that could cause this to create a cycle that you don't want to get stuck in. So you still have the ability to do that here. Now, again, just for demo purposes, pop-ups are nice and easy. So I'm going to make a quick pop-up just to demonstrate this, make sure that the pop-up shows up for myself. And with these datas. All right, so we just want a quick notification, hey, new data has been saved, whatever. I'm going to create this right here. So now I'm going to have some pop-up up here that should run after I try to save or create a new data here. There you go. There's another notification. I saved my flow since I'm building another flow somewhere else. It's still demonstrated. You'll see my after save flow does appear down here. So it is associated with this example case entity here. So now if I go to a flow now that has the ability to create this, right, this flow here is just going to create that, that entity for me. So if I run this and create a new entity or save new data here, I'm going to get that pop up again. So it's going to run my after save flow and show me, hey, in this data, new data has been saved. And I get my pop up there. So whatever it is that this before or after save flow is doing, it is going to send that message, send the data out, whatever it is that I'm trying to do with my data here so that it can be used. So there we go. I do have all the data now that I need, and I'm able to see how it can be used in and set up in my process. So two more things that I want to do before we end this video. And the first one is just look at a few different various examples of use cases because they've been used in a variety of different ways across decisions for people that have used them in different situations. So I want to highlight a couple and then just show one more quick example of how you could actually set one up to be used with a little bit less than just a simple pop-up. So one example, simply just using things with unit tests, right? Unit tests, very popular, very useful in decisions. Maybe you want to get those unit tests, get data from the unit tests to send off somewhere to make sure that it's being used. Maybe you want to just run them every time you save it just to make sure that the flow runs and the unit tests are working properly. Before you can continue the process or before you save, you want to make sure that those unit tests are running, things like that. If you want to force users to actually do certain things or make sure that things are completed within the flows, stuff like making sure that you change the step names, making sure you have a description on the flow, making sure that certain unit test requirements are met, like the amount of unit tests or making sure that they're passing, different things like that. You can have this in a before save flow that can have rules to assess that data. And if it fails the rules, then it doesn't save. And if it passes the rules, then it can save, things like that. Um, any kind of systems, if you're communicating with other outside systems, you may need to and want to gather the data from those other systems and maybe either get data from those systems or send data to those systems. So you could easily use the flow to gather that data and send it out. So, you're working with Jira or Confluence or any other, system that needs to use information or you want to use information, you could easily do that. Maybe grab a screen grab of the flow every time you make a new save or make an update to it so that that can be updated somewhere, something like that. If you're trying to, have your system that doesn't get data or capture data in the exact same way that decisions does, you could use that. For example, some places, I believe it is Jira, I could be wrong, but some places will, when it receives information from decisions, it just notifies it as a decisions user, no matter who is the decisions user that actually sent the data outward. But you could use the before after save flow to grab the user context from the flow and make sure that that system is actually told specifically who ran the flow or who saved the flow in that case. So instead of it just being told that it was a decisions user, it was actually telling you, hey, Jeremy was the one that did this, and that information can be saved. Sending messages, I kind of already mentioned this a little bit, and my example is just a basic pop-up message, but obviously you could do it through emails or other kind of methods to send messages to users. Something like maybe notifying a peer reviewer saying, hey, I just made some updates, I saved this flow. Now, without having to, manually send the message to tell them to review it, it'll just automatically tell them, hey, if a save has been made, please come in and review it, and then that user can review it before they end up pushing that to the repository or something like that. So you could easily track that data either just to be notified that there's a change made, or if there's to be notified because we want some action to be done, you can do that as well. And then finally, another really popular and basic example is just simply for auditing. If you want to be able to track the data, who was making changes, what changes were being made, that kind of thing, you could easily track that with that data. You have the user context, you have the possible changes and things. You can grab that data before the save or right after the save, and then send it off somewhere to track. For example, if you're looking at a repository, if you're familiar with how the repository works, whenever you check in something and send it to the repository will show you all the changes that have been made. But all of those changes are only the changes since the last check-in to the repository. The auditing before and after a save can audit every single change that has been made on each individual save. So maybe between check-ins, a user is going in and saving and closing and saving and closing this flow to make various changes 10, 20 different times before they officially check it into the repository. This would be able to track that. You could use the before and after saves to audit that and see how many changes were made, how often they were made, who's making those changes, that kind of thing. So it can be very useful. So I would just like to show one more quick example to show just a little brief view of how you can maybe block someone from moving forward until they have a description added on their flow. And then we'll be done looking at this topic. So back in decisions, I'm going to modify my flow before save test that I demonstrated earlier by just adding a rule in the beginning to decide if there is a description or not. So there's a lot of different ways you could do this, obviously, depending on what you're trying to track and what you're going to do. I'm going to use just a simple object as null just to check and see if the actual string that should be on the description is null. So if you're not familiar, if you go to Info tab, you can add descriptions. Usually when you first create a flow, you have the ability to add the description there as well, at least in the most current versions. So I'm going to just simply grab that. So on this, I'm going to pass in the data from my flow storage, which is for that flow, whatever the corresponding flow is. I've got the description here. I can grab the description. And so now this is just simply going to read that description and say, hey, is the data there? Null. Is there anything in that description? If there is something in the description, this is going to run false. So then I want it to show my pop-up and just save the data. If it is not there, right, if the object is null and there's nothing in my description, then I don't want this to go to the end, because if it goes to the end, it's going to save the data. So I want it to stop there. Maybe the way that I want to do this is by throwing an exception, and I want to be able to actually, create the exception that I want to throw, right? Something like that I could easily do here. Let me just create a quick basic message. Please fill out description. So now if there is no description, it'll throw up a little message. It won't let them save it, and the user will be told, hey, please fill out their description there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. And let's open up a flow here. So if I run my testing flow, in my testing flow, I've got a description here. It should just work just fine without there, because I do have data in this spot. So if I make a change, I go to save this. Saved, your flow has been saved. It works just fine. Let's open up a different flow. I think this one doesn't have a description, right? If this doesn't have a description, I make some change to it. I try to save it. It's going to throw a little message, and if I show the details, it tells me, hey, please fill out the description, because I have this throw exception step that's providing that information for me, right? And I could easily grab that. Then I dismiss it. You'll see it doesn't actually save. Like if I try to close this, it'll give me the prompt to save again, because I haven't saved it yet. Since this is a before save flow, it didn't end. It didn't complete that flow yet. So the data actually did not get saved. So then I say, oh yeah, I forgot to add this description. Let me add some description here real quick. Now I have a description. Let me go and save this. Your flow has been saved, right? It reads that data and allows me to confirm that my flow and everything in it has been saved. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do this. Obviously, you can, work to make the error more clean, or, find different ways to adjust how exactly you want that to look for a user. And there's, I'm sure, a lot of other ways that you could optimize this and, make it work in your system to check not just one, but many different things before it officially saves, and make sure that users are, designers are doing exactly what you want them to do in your system. And that is how we can generate and create some really cool things with before things save and after things save in decisions.